Kate Mila Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. And I want to welcome, back by popular demand,
Yeah, right.
Denise Siegel. I can't do it, Denise. You're much more persuasive, laying on all the praise. I just feel so stupid.
You don't have to do that. I don't care about that.
So
Yeah.
here's Denise, and we're here to rant and rave, right?
Yes. I'm gonna actually change this here. I'm gonna make myself taller or higher. See, look at that. Oh, that's a better
sit
angle.
on a phone book.
No, I just put my laptop up higher. I just realized it looked weird.
Oh, I think I
Well-
mentioned to you before I need a new chair, and I've been experimenting with different chairs around the house.
Yeah.
This is number 3. This is an old dining room chair from an old set we had that I liked, the old wood, and I painted it, all different colors. And
Cool.
it's so, well, it's, I don't know if you can you probably
No, I
can't.
can't see it really. Oh, I can kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
But the
cool.
paint's all worn off and stuff, it's
Is
very
it comfortable?
No. No, but I thought it was the right height. I'm sitting on a pillow and it's not doing any good.
No, you know what? And my husband doesn't have bad back, and he doesn't really appreciate comfort. Now he's older, he does a little bit more. But we had this dining room table and chairs that are just really, 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 really hardwood. He wanted to buy benches to sit, like pews to sit on in our old house. That was what he wanted for his living room finished furniture. I'm like, no fucking way, that is not happening. That's not fucking happening, because he's got a weird sense of
Well,
aesthetic.
when I was a kid, at one point we had one side we had a long dining room table, and one side was just like a long picnic bench with too many people, and you can't,
Right. No, it's uncomfortable, and I can't do that. I have a really bad back, and so now that so our dining room table is this really hard wood. It's like, and you can't sit in it for more than like 10 minutes without your butt hurting, your back hurting. I put all these pillows on it, so it doesn't work. So nobody ever sits at the dining room table because it's so uncomfortable, but it looks really nice. That's
what matters, right?
That's what for him. For me, I would have bought something really comfortable and I'd be like, who cares what it looks like?
Oh, we got rid of the whole concept of a dining room a long time ago. This is an old house and the floor plan is bizarre, but there is a room off. Well, we have a couple of living. It's little bar. I mean, it's hard to describe.
Is it kind of Victorian? Is there lots of little rooms?
No, it's not that. It's not that attractive.
Oh,
It's basically a box, a 2-story box. It was built at the turn of the century, the last century, and it's been updated in the 50s. Like they cut the eaves off, and So when we had a new roof put in, my husband put the eaves back on. That helped a lot. It's actually pretty cute on the outside. It's not elaborate. It's not scrolls and stuff. I love that, but it's not. But it does have a lot of old woodwork. Not necessarily, not necessarily good wood, but old wood and deep window sills.
That's nice.
The windows push up. They have lead weights in the walls.
Wow, that's cool.
At one point, he replaced the ropes because the ropes were all wearing out.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but so the floor plan is odd because in those days you were allowed to have much bigger windows.
Right.
No electricity, and there's only one plug in every room. It's an absolute nightmare, and we've had it rewired years and years ago, but there's a limit to how many plugs. I mean, they'd have to.
Right.
I mean, it's just
right. Crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, that makes sense.
So there are some real drawbacks to living in a very old house, but I like the feeling of it.
I do too. I like old houses. Yeah, I really do.
But there was a room that was sort of the designated dining room. And we pretty quickly stopped doing that. We didn't use it for a dining room. Actually, I gave birth in that room a couple of times.
Wow.
I knew that would impress you.
Well, that's amazing.
I had home births with most of my kids. All of them except the first one. I wised up after the first one, because the hospital.
You didn't need to, I guess.
Pardon me?
You didn't need to go to the hospital. Some people don't.
Yeah, no. And that's, neither here nor there. But I always like to point out, that's where you were born.
That's funny.
That's pretty funny. But I don't know. How do we get on this topic? It doesn't matter. Oh, chairs.
Yeah.
I need to get a chair and I just don't know what to do, because how do you buy a chair without actually sitting in it?
Yeah, you really shouldn't. I mean,
Yeah,
you
and I
can,
don't have access to.
unless you go into a place like that has a return policy, you can just ship it back or whatever.
We don't. I mean, I would have to go about 3 hours away to get to a store that sells that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's not, yeah.
That's not worth it.
I would just do a lot of research and buy one online. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. I would just do it. I mean, I bought this one online and it kind of sucks, but it's not terrible. Probably not as bad as the one you're, could be better.
There's not much that's worse than what I'm sitting in, I'll tell you. So anyway, this is by way of distracting ourselves from the dystopian nightmare that we're living in.
Yeah. So what's happening I lived in Los Angeles for a really long time, almost 30 years. And I went to every protest probably that there ever was in Los Angeles. And certainly I was at one of the biggest protests, which is the peace protest that was trying to get us not to go into the war after 9/11. And it was, it was so big. It wasn't really reported how big it was, because I think it was about 1 million people, because the entire, I think it was Santa Monica Boulevard. It was all the way a mile at least. And then you could look around a couple blocks and still see people marching. It was the biggest protest I've ever been at. I think there was probably 1 million people there. These protests were massive and totally peaceful. There was no problems, and police took care of the whole thing. There was no National Guard called in, nothing. Of course, it was a different time, and you didn't have, I think what's going on in Los Angeles now is there are some people, and like there was during the Floyd stuff, where they're just young kind of asshole guys who are kind of like
anarchical
anarchists who are just trying to get in there and fuck things up. But that's an easy problem the police could solve. They can just kind of take those guys out. And so when the riots happened, I was there as well, and the National Guard was eventually called in, but wasn't until basically half of but a bunch of South Central was on fire and being burnt, and Reginald Denny was being pulled out and beaten almost to an inch of his life of his truck. So that's when they called the National Guard in, and it was scary because it was really out of control. And that is the kind of situation you go like, okay, the National Guard is called for. But what's going on in Los Angeles right now is really not that big of a protest. It's not that problematic. Most of them were peaceful. There's some kind of douchebags who you could easily take out with the cops. And it's like, Trump is just looking for a way, an entrance, a right stock moment to impose martial law.
Yeah.
That's so obvious.
I remember the Watts riots.
Oh, yeah.
That was something else. And you're talking about a large population of disenfranchised people who'd had enough. And the frustration level was incredible. Okay? Well, that's not what we're talking about.
No, that's same with the LA riots. It was like that as well. But LA is also, I would say it's maybe not majority Hispanic, but it's pretty close. I mean, it's probably 50-50.
Well, it did
belong. A lot of Hispanic people there. I mean, because they used to belong to Mexico.
Yeah.
Just like, Texas has a lot of Mexicans, people from South America and Central America. Yeah. And it's like, California runs because of the immigrant population. Those people pick the food, they do the construction work, they are the maids, they do all of the service work. Basically, they are busboys, they work in restaurants. And California really can't survive as an agricultural center, and their economy would basically tank if they didn't have all the immigrant population. And California is trying to protect those people too, which is totally understandable. And I think what the prelude to the situation is that last week, or maybe a week ago, I don't know when it happened exactly, I can't remember now, but Gavin Newsome Trump said, I'm not going to give you guys any federal dollars anymore for anything. And Gavin Newsom said the thing I predicted, which was, they're going to withhold their tax money. I mean, if they do that.
Well, I think this is where we say California has the 4th largest economy in the world.
In the world. Yes.
Bigger than countries. Massive economy.
Yes.
Federal government needs California way more than California needs the federal government.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's like $80 billion or something in tax revenue. And so, Newsom was like, well, we'll just keep the money and pay for the services ourselves. And they'd probably be better off, frankly, because their money ends up being distributed throughout the country and given to places like red states that don't really have good economies.
Places like, no shade to the good people who live there, but places like Mississippi and Alabama, always
and
at
Tennessee.
the bottom of the list.
Right.
Always at the bottom of the list when it comes to the demographics that matter, things like life expectancy and infant mortality and literacy. They're always at the bottom. They make very little money in their own state that they can hang on to, and they depend on money from places like California.
Yes.
It's a union. We're supposed to be sharing. That's the idea.
Right. So when Newsom said that, which I predicted this, I mean, we talked about this, that the blue states, that would probably be the first move, would be, well, I figured Trump was going to say, I'm not going to pay for anything for the blue states because they're not, they don't show field
he's been doing that.
Right. So then I figured the blue states would wise up and go, well, then we're not going to give you any federal dollars. We're not going to give you our taxes. And once California does it, or whatever state, it could have been Illinois, it could have been New York, any one of the blue states. And if that happens, others will follow suit, and we'll have a secession movement.
Yes, coalitions of clumps of states in region by region that are going to get together and collaborate together in self-defense.
Right.
And I don't mean like self-defense from physical attack. I mean economic self-defense.
Right. So this to me was the start of what I saw happening with the Civil War. This is the start of a possible secession movement. Now, it doesn't have to go that way. I mean, maybe things will cool down. Probably not. I don't get that feeling. But that's what I saw as the first chess move that was going to happen. And then the second chess move I saw happening, the second piece I saw the domino falling, was this whole thing with, a protest going escalating, and then Trump actually shooting people or shooting at people, and that exploding into, into this whole kind of like violence.
As I told you, it's already happening. Yesterday in the daylight,
it was rubber bullets, though. Yeah.
Pardon me.
But it was just rubber bullets still.
But that's what an escalation is.
Right.
They took aim at the legs of an Australian woman reporter. She was on camera, on a microphone. It's all recorded. They intentionally shot at her with rubber bullets, got her in the leg.
That's terrible.
Foreign journalist. So I was telling Denise, and she did check it out. I very fortunately stumbled on an interview with Gavin Newsom yesterday. He was on site at some response center, and MSNBC cornered him. And usually I just, the mainstream media they don't do it for me, But I am interested in him. I have funny feelings. I have mixed feelings about him. So I wanted to hear what he had to say.
Same, yeah.
So the guy says to him, Fox is calling this riots. And if you don't mind, I'm going to cherry pick some things that he said and just
go ahead.
Okay. So Fox calls this riots. What about these protests? And so what he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm close to exactly what he said. Donald Trump created the conditions you see. He's exacerbated peaceful protests, and they're not a riot. It was peaceful. He lit the proverbial match. He put fuel on the fire. What he did, calling the National Guard, is an illegal, immoral act. And what I love about this, why I want to really focus on it, he called the truth. He said the words. He said, it's against the law because according to the law, which we'll talk about, The federal government is required to coordinate with the governor of the state, not just willy-nilly call in the military. And he didn't do that. And California is going to sue the federal government for this, according to Newsome. He said, we have a trained force in California. We dealt with the George Floyd protests without any problem. We dealt with the fire situation. We had to protect property. They have what they call rattlesnake teams. And I think those are probably quick response teams, who go out. They're trained to deal with crowd control and disruption and whatever. He said, we've had no problem. We've got protocol. We have a whole plan in place. We have really good mutual coordination with all the law enforcement in California. And then he said, and I quote, Trump lied. He said that it's all been fine, but he lied, and he did it to deploy the National Guard. It was an excuse. He said he's lying, and he was heated. It's unconstitutional. Yeah, it's illegal. This is Trump's mess. He said, we're trying to clean up his mess. He's not coordinating with the state of California. He made sure that the situation on the ground is now less safe. He's not telling anything to people in charge in California what the plan is. He said, yes, there are non-peaceful, anarchical provocateurs who are taking advantage of the situation and causing problems. And he said, it's wrong to destroy property. It's wrong to be hurting people. It's wrong to be attacking the police. He said, they're damaging the foundation of our republic, these people that are causing the unrest. He said they are helping Trump in his authoritarian tendencies. I got the sense he was implying that they were salted in the crowd. Do you know what I'm saying? And what else did he say? He said Trump needs to stand down. And I have a few other little things that I wanted to tell you because the words were so great. He said he just talked to Trump a couple of days previous to this breaking out. He said none of these issues came up. He never said a word about any of it to Newsome. We had a decent conversation. Late Friday night, he talked to Trump. It was all good. It was hearts and flowers, right? And
yeah, I guess what everyone says with Trump, that he talks to them and they're nice, and then he does backstabbing.
Right. But Newsome called him for the filth that he really is. Newsome says Trump never once brought up the National Guard. He's a stone cold liar. He's a stone cold liar. He never did bring up the National Guard, because now he's saying that he talked to Newsome about it. It was a civil conversation. He said, I've always wanted to approach engagement with the president of the United States in a respectful and responsible way, but there's no working with this president. There's only working for him. And I will never work for Donald Trump. And he just goes on, and it gets better and better. And everybody should watch that. It's a 15-minute interview.
Yeah, I watched about 5 minutes.
Title of it, if you're looking for it,
you can just
YouTube,
you don't even have to do that. You can just put in Gavin Newsome in Google, on MSNBC, and it comes up. It's like 14 minutes. It's on the MSNBC website too.
Okay. So I don't go to the particular websites. I just Googled interview Gavin Newsome, and I got a million interviews. But make sure and highlighted. It's called MSNBC. Governor Newsome. Governor Newsome tells President Trump to stand down amid LA.
Yeah, you could just put Gavin Newsome, LA.
Well, there's a bunch of different.
Anything that's related, and MSNBC most recent Gavin Newsome interview, any of that you'd get it. Yeah. It's way up there, but it's pretty easy to find.
Mad respect though, because the governors are really showing up.
They are.
Pritzker, Newsome.
But this is part of the thing that I was saying though. I mean, I'm glad they're doing this, right? But this is exactly. I mean, this has to happen. I think it's karmic, but I mean, this is what I've been saying for a long time. And I know I've been hopeful that maybe it wouldn't. I mean, because I have these things, but then people can always change their minds. Things can change, right? But the way I see it is, this is the start of what we'll look back on and say this was the beginning of the secession movement. This is the beginning of the end. Now, I don't know how fast it's going to move, and that's what I've been trying to figure out. I figured this summer would be a lot of turmoil, would settle down a little bit, and then next spring would be another bunch of turmoil because Uranus is going over the fourth house cusp. It'll still be angular in this U.S. Constitution chart. So we're kind of in this escalating period, and then it'll kind of still be bad, but a little bit mellow into the fall and the winter. Maybe just the winter, things will slow down because of the nature of that, people being sort of other things happening. I don't know why, but then it starts to escalate again. And every time it kind of escalates, I think it goes to another level. And this is the first level of it. Like, this is, to me, the beginning of what I think is going to be a civil war. This is the beginning of it. And I don't really know if Trump has engineered this or understands that he's causing what he will cause. I think what he's trying to do is trying to control everybody, but he's not going to be able to do that. And people are going to fight back, and you're going to have a bunch of the blue states, like I said, I think eventually find some kind of way to secede, whether it's just a tax thing, or then the tax thing becomes their own little, they find their own safe haven. But look, if California seceded or stopped paying taxes, New York did that, Illinois did that. Those are three of the biggest economies. And like you said, California is the fourth biggest. I think Chicago, like Illinois, is like the 11th biggest. New York
in the world,
is
or in the
biggest. Yes, in the world. And so
Yikes.
yeah,
really
in the world.
impressive. Yeah.
And so you've got these states that are massive economic engines who basically fund the entire federal government, really. And if they were to go and say, fuck you, we're not paying our taxes, we're going to keep those federal tax dollars, and we're going to fund our own things. And hey, any other blue states want to join us, we'll pile in with you guys and we'll create our own second state. Then you've got a real secession movement. And I think this is the first seedling of that. This is the little seed put in the ground. And this is this is one of the signs to me that this is going in this direction. Now, like I said, things can always be pulled back. People can change. But if Trump is going to continue clamping down and going the direction he's going to go, he is going to cause a fracturing. And I think that there is also a karmic kind of, you remember Superman? I don't know Superman cartoons or anything, but I only know it from the Seinfeld episode where there's some kind of bizarro world kind of Superman situation where there's a bizarro world Superman, I guess. I don't know anything about it. But according to the episode I saw of Seinfeld in the 90s or whatever it was, everything's kind of backwards, everything's the opposite. And to me, this is like a mirror of what the first Civil War was. If you think about everything about it, the first Civil War was, a Republican trying to save the Union from a group of people trying to keep slavery. He was trying to kind of, now the intention wasn't to emancipate them, was to basically shift it so that they, make it so that people eventually could get out of slavery, right? But eventually they pushed it to the point where he had to just come on one side or the other, and he chose,
Well, what did they do? They started to become provocative. They attacked federal installations.
Exactly. So he had no choice. So in order to keep the Union, so it was to keep the Union together. It was for a minority group who was being oppressed, and it ended up changing the country dramatically. And then he got assassinated in the end. And he was an originalist. He believed in the Constitution. What do we have now? We have somebody who's a foreign puppet who is trying to break the country, and he's got hold of the red states, and the blue states are deciding, the people who want to protect the minority group are, I thought it'd be over women's rights, or could be over,
Yeah, but it's the supporters of the vulnerable that are the ones who are talking.
Exactly. It doesn't matter the women's rights and Hispanics, whatever. So now you've got the opposite. You've got people trying to protect vulnerable people against the federal government. You've got the president who is basically taking a hammer to the institutions and breaking apart, people.
Wants to get rid of the Constitution.
And he wants to get rid of the Constitution. So it's like bizarro world mirror of the original, the first, and the thing that's so insane about it too, it's giving me the chills, is this is the year when we're in the exact Neptune return to the beginning of the Civil War as well.
Here's another factor that you didn't mention that I think is really interesting. I've only learned this myself lately. Lincoln was the driver behind all moves that happened federally, flying in the face of heavy pressure from his cabinet, from the larger Congress. Nobody agreed with him. Nobody agreed with him. And
the opposite.
The opposite. And now something somewhat similar is happening, but in the opposite direction.
Right. Everything is like a mirror. It's really weird. So here's why I knew this period of time. And I think the first Trump administration, there was a Pluto return that was happening to the Revolutionary War. And then now we're in the Pluto return of the Constitution being formed and signed and everything like that. So I think that he came into power during them. And it's interesting, he lost for 4 years. And I wondered about this when it was happening, if that would be the case, because we're in the period now that is the really, really, if somebody would have stepped forward who was more extreme than Trump, he wouldn't have. I believe that the universe is just using him as a tool. Somebody else who could have come, who was younger, would have been a lot worse. You know what I'm saying? But we're lucky that we have this idiot as our president.
Trump is on a revenge tour. And he's a very impulsive person. He's got feral canniness. So I think he's got instinct and that psychopathic drive for revenge.
Yes.
And I don't think there's a lot of long-term strategic.
No, he's not strategic at all.
They're using him. And what's behind him is really dangerous. Where Lincoln was the brains and the driver of the movement, Trump is not.
No, he's kind of like Reagan. He's just a puppet in some ways. Not exactly, because he's got his own agenda, and his agenda is to take as much candy as he can for himself and get his ego plumped up. And he really doesn't care about anything else. He only cares about punishing people who are mean to him because he's got a very thin skin. He's a baby. And, you know what I'm saying? And
now, Denise, don't be a nasty woman.
Right. So, so I think the thing astrologically that's interesting about this period of time is that basically we're in the return for every single war that we've ever had in this country.
It's so creepy. I know. It's
so creepy. Yeah. We're in the Neptune return and these are planetary cycles that are hundreds of years long. The Neptune cycle is like 240 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time. Then the Pluto return, that's almost 200 years. It's 160 years, something like that. And then the Uranus return, which the last time we had Uranus crossing the fourth house cusp we had it during the Revolutionary War. Then we had it in the same placement when we had the Civil War.
Civil War. And was it World War II?
And World War II, when we were bombed in Hiroshima. So every time there's been a war on our soil, anytime violence through war has happened on the soil, it's been when Uranus is right at this place that's at now. So you've got that going on. So you've got all of the major planetary alignments saying something crazy. It has to happen right now. You guys have to look at your shadow stuff. You have to deal with all this inequality. You have to because I think it's time for us, as we go through the Pluto return of the U.S. Constitution signing chart, is to think about how can we make this a better union? How can we improve this country, that's the positive thing that we could think about. The negative thing is, if we don't do that, we will lose this country and we will have a failed state. I think it's going to be one or the other. Either we're going to emerge, and I think we will emerge as a better country, because I think there's a lot of good people here who want that to be the case. But we are all going to have to be involved in it on some level.
I think it's going to be a long, drawn-out struggle. I don't think it's going to be solved in the 26 elections. You know
what? It's not going to be solved until the next decade. That's how long it's going to go.
I keep having this conversation with people, and it's friendly disagreement, who tend to be more optimistic that this is all just going to settle. And the part of the story that is underplayed and not spoken about, and even though I've heard about it, I've read about it, I've listened to people, it goes in one ear and out the other because it's technical and complicated. But just suffice it to say that while all of this chaos is going on, there are other people quietly implementing Project 2025.
Right.
And there's the big stuff, the big splashy stuff, like fire all the civil servants. But there are small technical legal things that they are doing that are going to be impossible to undo, that are creating roadblocks on every path that we might have.
That's why I'm saying, Helen, that's why this is not going to be normal. I mean, people keep saying, well, we get him impeached, we'll do that. And that's all great. And I'm glad that people want to think of positive sort of levers that we have in our government, or even the fact that people are thinking like there's this group of people that are trying to prove that the election was stolen, and they're going through the court system, and they're thinking they could uncertify Trump and put Kamala Harris in. I think by that dream I had where I was in this magical land talking to a gnome and an elf lady who were like real, like sort of weirdly like office workers, and we're drinking coffee and this, and they were like, yeah, Kamala Harris is going to be president. I'm like, wow, ye of little faith. I guess I should have believed it. But I think the metaphor of that dream was people are working for this, but it's a pipe dream. I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
It's a fairy tale. And I think that it's great that people want to do that. It's you know what, every single lever, every single avenue should be, I think every single thing should be, every path should be, walked in this situation to try to stop this. So I think that's great what they're doing. In fact, it's great if it could work, but I don't think it's going to.
Well, what the judges have come out now and done. Yes, people will point out to me, but look, this judge just blocked what he said, or this judge stopped him from doing that. Yes, that's true. That's an optimistic sign. But what we're not talking about, because we don't know about it, because it's such minutia of how the legal system works, the judges on lower levels have decreed basically that the president, anything that the president says, there's a term for it. I've got it written down here somewhere. I'll stumble upon it.
It's fine.
Everything he says is considered word of God. Yeah.
Right.
That if the president has an idea, you are not allowed to debate it now. So if the president says,
well, that's what they're doing. What you're saying is exactly why I think they're basically forcing the situation into this one road. There is no other road. They're closing down all of the other
avenues. Right. So if he says something like, there's an invasion, meaning people, then there's an invasion.
Right. You're supposed to go along with it, like he's a king. And that's the thing is, I think this is the part that people are not really understanding about.
No, it's difficult to understand.
And it's fine. I think people, I don't want to bum everyone out or anything. And like I said, things can change.
Well, then we better just put an end to this right now.
Right, because I'm a bummer. I mean, I get a lot of bummer information. That's what the spirit tells you, stuff to be aware, wary of. It doesn't tell you rainbows and unicorns are going to come dancing on your lawn. It tells you stuff to be careful about, Anyway, so what I think is, this is the problem we're in. And I think as every year passes, people are going to understand this more, that there is only one option. And that option is basically to remove him forcibly from office and all of his people, and at the best,
that's the important thing. All of his people, because
all
like
of his
I said,
people.
he's
Yeah.
a tool. He's not an engine. And all of his people are dangerous.
Yes, but here's the thing, I think. The thing I think is, I think there are already people who are in positions of power or were in positions of power who understand what's going on. Okay. I think there are contingency plans happening on a level we don't fully understand. I've gotten that hit. So I'm not saying that they're going to step in and do anything. What I'm saying is that when people start to make waves to move in the direction of removing this institutionalized king, there will be people supporting that who know what they're doing, I think. And when that happens, I believe the people will win. I'm certain.
So what you're saying is they're not going to instigate that moment of removal, but they're there to pick up pieces.
They're going to support it. And I think what will happen is the people will win, and we will have a completely, it will be like somebody took, the Constitution and just took a dump all over it and shredded it into pieces. Our country will have to rewrite a document. We'll have to basically have our own Marshall Plan. We will have to really rethink our Constitution and the laws. And this is why I've been saying for a while, and I know I'm so far ahead of things sometimes that it's useless and like people just can't understand what I'm talking about.
This is hard, Denise. You and I are both coming from a point of view that's had many, many decades of this stuff percolating around in the back of our minds, right? I mean, dreams and notions and recognizing things that are not necessarily obvious on the surface, but you look at them and you go, oh, I know what they're up to. Yeah.
Right.
And so that's called having time to process it.
That's right. That's why. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm trying to put it out there, but not be too obnoxious. As it gets closer, I'm gonna get more involved with this aspect of things, which is people are going to have to think about what kind of government do they want on the other side of this. And I mean that really. And that's why, your friend who you had, the guy that you had, and I had him on my program. I don't know if he's the way, but he's got the right idea.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I'm not sure he's the right thing or not, but he's at least trying to implement this.
Yeah, it's a beginning. I mean,
it's a beginning, right?
Faltering steps it took for them, the Continental Congress and it took a while to get what they did. And I am of the belief that, do you remember Project 1619?
Yes.
Okay.
Vaguely.
And the horrible pushback against that book. I believe that a lot of people that are in the administration now and fueling it in the background recognize the truth in that book, that we have a karmic, moral, call it social, call it what you want, obligation to right our wrongs from history.
Yes, we do. I 100% agree.
And that's why they're changing DEI and they're changing education and they're censoring books because of that thing. I think that's what they don't want people to talk about. You say the word reparation and all hell breaks loose. People don't even want to talk about it.
Well,
oh, see, you just went dark. That's hilarious.
And I went dark for a second and then I blinked back in. I think the problem is the US. Oh, I lost you. Okay.
Well, while she's gone,
well, I'll just talk until she comes back in, I guess. I'm still recording it.
Because I don't know what's going on here. I hope she'll come back.
I think the situation is we're in a karmic.
Let's talk about the Insurrection Act, because I have some notes here on the Insurrection
time frame. And
Act from 1807. There's a lot of talk about it.
That karmic time frame is instigating
what exactly is it? And it was part of
us and saying to us, we have to basically.
It is part of the U.S. Code. What's the U.S.
Right the wrongs of our past. And we're not going to be able to write all of our
code, you might ask. I had to look it up. The U.S. Code is
wrong. So we need to address them. We need to come to terms with them. We need to make sure that they
like 50 plus heavy books full of all the permanent
don't reiterate
laws of the federal government, and they must update it.
And that we address them in our laws and in our society. I
Constantly as legislation changes, but
I can't believe she's still not back in here.
She'll be back. The Insurrection Act is
okay, that's kind of kooky.
Part of what they call Title
10. Let's see what's going on here. Yep. Okay, I'm still
10. That's one section of the U.S. Code.
I'm still here. She's not. All right, we'll see when she comes back.
So it empowers the president to deploy the military.
Again, it seems like maybe she her internet
and federalize the national
was kind of janky. So I think that what's happening
National Guard to support or deal with
here is we're in a very, very
civil disorder, or if there's an insurrection or an
armed period of time where we're supposed to deal with our shadow stuff.
Rebellion. And the state, if it's not,
we had that big X over the United States of two
willing or able to do anything about it. So if a state is overwhelmed,
solar eclipses that met in the center, in the heart.
It's an exception to what came later called the possibility
of our country. The first one, when Trump had just become
Comitatus Act, which limits the president's right to
become president, and the second one right before he became president again.
The deployment of the military against the population. So
it's not a coincidence that happened. The rarity of that.
So I, like most people, go, wait a minute, they can't use the military.
It's so rare for that to occur. One going over an entire
to police civilians. Theoretically, no, they can't.
Continent. It happens like every 300 years. Two of them within a
can't unless they invoke the Insurrection Act.
A 4-year, like an 8-year period. That's like a
part of Title 10, which says the president can
an 1,000-year event or something like that. It's very, very unusual.
Federalize the National Guard when there is
it just doesn't happen very often. I mean, it's
insurrection or armed rebellion and civil disorder, and who
no eclipse usually hits the same exact place.
Gets to define what that is. That's really the issue.
For and the fact that two of them would be going over our continent.
So the U.S. Title 10, U.S. Code Title 10,
and just be hitting us like that is so unusual.
As the broader umbrella, the Insurrection Act is part.
And it's a message from the universe that we need to pay attention
to it. And it's not been invoked
into our shadow. We need to address our shadow issues. If we
yet that people are talking about, well, if he's brought in the National Guard,
we are going to call ourselves the moral authority of the world as Americans, and
he has automatically invoked it. No, he doesn't.
Supposed to be the beacon of light. This is a call out to us to
have to invoke it because of the broader aspect of
become that actual beacon, to root out
the Title 10. But in my opinion, the
darkness in our own hearts, to learn to be
perception that he could invoke it, that the potential
better people and more accepting and loving, and to
exists and probably will, is
push forward into the next century a much more
and is using it against civilian protests and
humanity
and what were peaceful protests until he got involved.
Holistic human race
it sets up an adversarial relationship
oriented divine field.
It heightens emotions and it creates a situation that's more volatile than the original situation needed to be.
And also, I think having respect for all beings
turns what was a protest into something.
learning how to live in balance, learning how
violent, and it gets real touchy to
to love one another, learning how to see each other as brother and sister.
define what's going on. It's a he said situation with
And really, taking the knowledge
the governor and the president. So
we have to fix and to heal ourselves and to heal the planet.
The president's behavior and
if we don't do that, we're looking
his demeanor and his treatment of people, the national
at an existential crisis on a whole other level. And so the
guard, the federal people that are there, the
universe is giving us this chance. Are we going to become beacons of light? We've been
law enforcement that is there, their treatment, it
saying we are. Are we going to become the real leaders, spiritual leaders?
It uses overwhelming physical force against people. It's intended
the not just military leaders, but
to intimidate. It's intended to increase fear.
The spiritual leaders of the human race as a country, trying to,
and it's sending a clear message that they're in control.
Spread democracy and peace and also cohesion.
We aren't, and that there's something inherently wrong
and oneness with each other and with the earth itself.
Wrong with our
we could do that. But we're
protesting publicly. We have that right in the First Amendment, the Bill of
going to have to root the darkness out of our own heart. And that's what this period of karmic
rights, the First Amendment, freedom of speech, the freedom to
being pummeled by all of these different outer planets
to address your government when you're redress the government when you're not happy
aspects is about. Now I'm going to wrap it up
with what they're doing and the freedom of assembly.
Because I don't think she's going to be able to come back in. Something must happen to her internet.
So, and those things together are guaranteed.
So I'm going to leave it at that and thank Helen for this opportunity to
that it's perfectly okay to go out in the street and
talk to her. And you'll see us soon. And I will come back.
Signs and sing songs and march. And they've
at some other time and have a second part of this conversation.
Tried all sorts of different avenues to prevent that.
When this is resolved. All right.
Including, let me see if Denise is trying to get a hold of me here. Including,
I don't even know. Okay. Blessings to all. God bless you all. Lots of love.
Including things like,
Bye-bye.
passing